Good morning, everyone. This is the November 8th, 2022 meeting of the Planning, Resource and Development Committee. I can see by my screen that all committee members are present. The chair, I am attending by Zoom. So we have a quorum. Number 3, approval of the minutes from October 25th. Anyone care to make that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval.
Supervisor Morehouse, is there a second?
Supervisor Bjork, second.
Supervisor Bjork seconds. Any discussion, corrections, additions? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Minutes are approved. Do we have any public comments today, Tom?
We have received none by email, but there are some people in the audience. You may want to just ask if any of them are here
Sure.
for public comment.
Is anyone attending today wish to speak to the committee?
Not seeing anybody, Tom.
Okay, then we'll move on. We have no public hearing. Staff reports, starting with the Register of Deeds monthly report. Any questions on this?
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Heather.
I don't have anything to add, so yes, if
Okay.
there's any questions.
All right, any questions for Heather?
You anticipate that I'm going to ask you, what was the $1 million
Oh,
transaction?
Goodness.
I'm sorry.
And I didn't bring that, Diane.
I'm always curious about those.
Yeah, so please step up.
Okay.
We'll pull it up. We can certainly do that.
All right.
I
Thank you.
don't want to say, I think I remember, but I don't want to say without. So stop up to the office on your way out. We'll look it up.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's move on then. Zoning, survey division, excuse me. Mr. Carlson. Any questions on this or any comments, Tom?
No, just, I guess, bring attention to that. I gave a presentation again that I've done in the past at UW Stout. Did that on October 19th. Same presentation, just a different group of students. So went over very well.
What will they be doing career-wise, Tom?
They'll be in the construction field, likely like in a managerial type position, overseeing construction projects from
Okay.
utilities to building construction, a wide range of construction related disciplines.
Any other questions, Mr. Carlson? Okay, let's move on. Planning and zoning. With some staff changes and
Yeah, we have Janet retiring in December and Jackie's just finishing up her seasonal stint at the end of this week.
how will you be handling the new hire?
To replace Janet.
Yeah,
So I actually have a meeting with HR today to move forward on that, and I'm not sure if there'll be any overlap. We'd sure like it if there was, but we're kind of running out of time
all
here.
right, yeah.
Jackie has volunteered to help a little bit if we need to, so we might have to explore that, but yeah, we'll never be able to replace her fully. We just won't
Yeah.
replace her. It'll just be a new person, but she's been pretty special and has a lot of knowledge, so there'll be no replacing that.
So a question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
How long has, Janet, been here? It seems like forever.
26 years.
Okay, that's a long time.
Yeah, I had to confirm this morning. I was like, how long has it been? I think I put in there just over 2 decades, and it's a lot. Yeah.
Well, best wishes to her in retirement, obviously. Any other questions, Van? Okay. Moving on to land and water.
I don't really have anything to add specifically other than we did have the opportunity to backfill a position that left vacant by Steve Olson with Rick Ingley, and Rick is here today. So I don't, Rick, if you want to come up, or for you're welcome to come to sit up here if you want. Otherwise, many of you may remember Rick. He did work for our department in the past, and we're fortunate to have him back. And he'll be working on a lot of stuff related to our Ag Performance Standard Ordinance, Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, the Red Cedar Demonstration Farm. He'll be responsible for the primary contact for the no-till drill rental, and then whatever else we throw at him. That's the other duties as assigned, as we all get in our job description. So.
Welcome.
Mr. Chair, can I?
Yeah.
This is a comment. I was invited by a neighbor to attend, I don't know what you'd call it, I guess a conference involving the DNR, the federal with John Sipple, and then our county. It was a follow-up of a long-standing situation. And I wanted to say Travis Dreyer did just an amazing job, professionalism. He had the knowledge at the tips of his fingers and answered it and helped diffuse any kind of anger that may have been. And it was also just a wonderful example of the DNR, or let's say the feds, the state, and the county sitting down in the same room with the farmer and talking and working together and offering the farmer the different possibilities and leaving it up to them. And there was no pressure to put anything on the farmer, even though it was a long-standing compliance issue, I guess. So I just got to hand it to Chase and his department, and in particular Travis, who was there. I had never been to anything like that. It was really interesting. Once again, meet so many knowledgeable, professional, nice people. So good job on his staff. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate your willingness to be there upon request by the landowner too, because I think hopefully this is a positive atmosphere for that, and we can get to a resolution in the near future for, like you mentioned, a long-standing situation. So.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Gary.
Going through your packet and just make sure I got it clear in my head on that Lake District, they cannot create any ordinance that would supersede the county ordinance or the township, right?
Gary, if it's okay with you, can we wait? We have that on the agenda down a little lower. Is that okay if we wait to have that discussion?
On the agenda. Yeah, that's okay.
Sure. He said it's okay. We'll wait till later.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Chase, I was just wondering, you mentioned a perpetual easement on the EQIP program. How do those work?
Well, it would be for the CREP program, so Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, and that is it's a combination of a program between the state government and federal government. So the federal government will issue and sign a 15-year agreement to set aside basically existing cropland that has history of being cropped into some sort of permanent cover. And once the 15-year agreement expires, the state of Wisconsin is willing to purchase or approve a perpetual easement on that property. So there are incentives that the state will pay, and the state will hold the easement in perpetuity, that land will always stay in permanent cover. So depending on the location, the size, the soil types, that value of what that I guess incentive payment is can vary. But these aren't that common. And actually in the almost 14 years that I've been in working with CREP in both Pepin and Dunn counties, I've never experienced someone signing up for a perpetual easement. So we do have them in Dunn County, as well as we had them in Pepin County too, but they were when the CREP program first initiated. So to have 2 in 1 year is not very common. So it's a bit of a refresher, but it is a easement held by the state. We just facilitate it. We're kind of the boots on the ground for the state program.
Okay, thank you.
So a question on that,
Sure. Okay.
is there public easement then too for public access?
No, there's not.
Okay, so that's
Yep.
not part of, okay, because
Correct.
that would be a big no to a lot of people, all of a sudden it's
Right.
public access,
Right.
okay, thank
Nope,
you.
it's still private ownership. Everything all applies that you would as if you were a private, continues to be a private owner of it. However, just the development of it as an agricultural use is limited. So
One small follow-up, Tom, please.
Sure.
So when the land changes hands, is it easy to get lost, get that, and a new farmer says, well, I wonder why that's not being used or whatever?
So it will be recorded on the deed. So there will be, through title searches and stuff, it will be apparent that it's part of the property. It is also monumented. So there is a, survey stakes and signage that will designate that area. Now, obviously without proper maintenance of that, those signs can disappear, but it is GPS located and it is recorded on the deed.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thanks for the excellent reports, as always. Item 8A, the 2023 legislative agenda.
All right, this is Chase. I'm going to maybe spearhead this one and share my screen. So as you all know, we need to act swiftly on this. This was something that we didn't get on the agenda in time. So this needs to be kind of a working document here today. What we provided in the packet was last year's legislative agenda. A bulk of the land use topics on there tend to be related to our programming within the Land and Water Conservation Division. So that's why you get to hear me speak on this. But on the screen, I took that 2023 or 2022 agenda we had for this year and started to provide some edits to it. I scrambled a bit and tried to put together in consultation with some of our state association, the Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association, some of the legislative actions and goals that are being done currently, and tried to incorporate some of those in here. So, Mr. Chair, I guess depending on how you would like to go through this, I can walk through each existing bullet point.
Sure, why don't you walk through them, Chase?
Okay. So the first one was support for the establishment of a Wisconsin Legacy Fund to support core conservation and environmental programs and practices. So I didn't suggest any edits to that. I think that's still a valid, concern for longstanding support for conservation in the state. The idea of a Wisconsin Legacy Fund and that those terminology is somewhat duplicated from the Minnesota Legacy Fund and some of the efforts that Minnesota took under their action here several years ago. In Wisconsin, it would be a little bit different process. There'd have to be a constitutional amendment to create a legacy fund. So it's a bit more complicated and more of an uphill battle for that. But in relation to other efforts at the state level, this is still a topic of discussion from time to time. So unless you have other thoughts or comments, I didn't provide any suggested edits on it.
Does the committee have any comments on this particular point?
I was just wondering if you can blow it up a little on the screen.
Yeah. Sorry. I was getting better. That's a little delayed reaction here, but okay. So item B then, request full funding for all local land conservation staff according to formula contained in chapter 92.14, parent 6, parent B of Wisconsin statutes. So this is one that you may be familiar with too. It's a longstanding discussion topic and advocacy effort, both locally and statewide. A reminder that in statute chapter 92, that's where the requirement to have a land conservation committee and then the ability to receive grant funds to provide funding for staff positions in a land conservation department. Historically, there are a couple of key words in the statute that states that this department shall attempt to fund the full funding formula. So the funding formula is 100% of the first position, 70% of the second position, and 50% of the third and any other additional position that a county may hold. That has never been fully funded in the last, well, probably close to 16 years. And recently in the last biennial budget, we're taking incremental steps closer. So we do have full funding of the first position, full funding as stated in statute for the second position at the 70% rate. And we do have some funding towards the third position right now. What this statement is advocating for and what our state Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association will be advocating for is the full funding. So that is full funding according to the entire formula for all positions that a county may hold. So in our department, there's 8 of us that would require 50% funding for the third through 8th position, which, as you know, significantly impacts the county's levy and local budget. So I would suggest leaving that in there. I did provide one suggested with the all local. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology, but trying to emphasize that it's full funding of all the positions that a county may have.
Any questions?
You've highlighted statute.
I highlighted the statute, so I can pull that up if you want to see the actual terminology, but that was just for reference. Okay.
Okay.
Item C then, this was on our legislative agenda before as well, support state grant program for disposal of deer carcasses. This is not really within the workload or responsibility of any of our particular divisions or department, but it was of interest at one time, so I didn't feel it was my position to suggest whether it stay or be removed, but I guess that's up for your discussion right now.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's not clear to me why that's here. It doesn't seem to, it doesn't certainly seem to me to be a priority for Dunn County. That's just me.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
I think maybe Gary could comment on that because that was put in at the request when we had the Dunn County Solid Waste because they took care of it at the time. I'm sure it's a problem, but I don't know if it's our problem right now.
No, because we had a deal that would go up to, I think, the Barron incinerator for all carcasses that was brought in. So it took care of any possibility of that CWD being transferred. And it is a problem because we've had some here in Dunn County. And, but I don't think it fits the use right now at all, but it's still a good idea.
I could provide a couple of comments too. So the Department of Natural Resources field station here in Menominee does have a dumpster that they collect carcasses from the opening of so basically the middle of September all the way through any deer season. So there is a disposal location there. I'm not certain if any towns or other municipality may host a dumpster for collection. I do know that sometimes sportsmen's clubs have sponsored the collection of dumpster somewhere, but at this point in time, I'm not aware of that other than there is a location currently here in Menominee.
so
We could take that out then probably for our agenda because it's already being taken care of then.
is there any objection to taking that out?
No,
Okay, let's do that then.
So I'll leave the edits up on there till we're completely finished, but I'll try to make them as we go. Item D, originally said approve the 13 water quality measures passed by the Wisconsin Assembly in 2020, but not yet acted on by the Wisconsin Senate. So if you recall, 2019 was a Speaker's Task Force on Water Quality, was a statewide efforts. And there, as a result of that, there were 13 water quality bills that were proposed. In early 2020, the state assembly adopted or recommended approval of all of those 13 bills. And then COVID-19 pandemic started and the Senate never met again to fulfill their work on this effort. So in a way, this has really strung out a long time. However, there has been some action in recent year or two on some of those water quality bills. So there has been, I can just refresh you the 13. So there was one was a new Office of Water Policy in the Wisconsin Geological Natural History Survey. Two was increase funding for county conservation staff. 3 was a well compensation revisions. 4 was public comment period for all for establishing groundwater standards. 5 was a nitrate contamination pilot program. 6 was assistance to farmers for conservation. So mainly looking at cover crop rebates for through the crop insurance program and some managed grazing efforts. 7 was groundwater testing, mapping, and outreach. 8 was a freshwater collaborative funding. 9 was related to PFAS or some of the forever chemical discussion. 10 was wetland and floodplain restorations. 11 was Wisconsin Fund for septic systems. 12 was biomanipulation projects, and 13 was a prohibition on sale or use of coal tar based, basically sealants or driveway sealants, road sealants. So of those 13, several have had action on them. More recently was the well compensation program received about $10 million, some of it in ARPA funding for modifications and amendments to the existing well compensation program. So if there's high nitrates, arsenic present in drinking wells, there is a process now that has additional funding and changes in criteria of who is eligible for either having their well replaced, mainly having their well replaced. There is some efforts with some of these other projects. So the hydrologist staff at WGNHS, the Wisconsin Geological and Natural History Survey, that is still in the process of being discussed, but would provide more support for local communities around groundwater. There is currently a nitrate contamination pilot program that's available through DATCAP. There was cover crop insurance rebates up to $5 per acre for the establishment of cover crops related to the crop insurance program. So there has been some funding towards a freshwater collaborative. There have been several efforts that in part or in whole have followed up on some of these original 13. So my just real brief suggestion would be to remove the 13 and review and approve the remaining. And we can certainly get into details of whatever level you want to include in this. Further down in some of these other bullet items, there is some related agenda topics that are part of the original 13 that we've in a way duplicated, but in more or less try to provide emphasis on those. So if you have any thoughts or suggestions on this particular item.
Any thoughts from the committee? Partly this was the intention of this was to maintain some political pressure on our legislators to follow through on the provisions of all the hearings they had around the state and the studies they had around the state. That effort is, as Chase said, kind of only partially in play. But so I don't see anything wrong with keeping this in there unless we feel like we want to sort of move on politically.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
No, I think it should stay in. I think we need some emphasis on this, and I think Chase's edit is just perfect.
Okay. Other questions? Anybody object to leaving this in there as it is? Okay, let's go on.
All right, letter E, increase funding to support expansion of grants for local clean sweep hazardous waste disposal programs. So as you recall, the clean sweep program kind of disappeared when the recycling solid waste program disappeared. There is clean sweep efforts here within the city of Menominee and potentially surrounding towns in the future. But I know there is the option for counties to still participate in such a program, but I think the grants in the past may not have been fully covering the expenses, so.
I would think that would be best to be left with the local municipalities or the city, because they're the one that's gonna run it. And we don't have the staff that we did before in Dunn County Solid Waste, so I think that'd be a good one to strike out for us.
Isn't this calling for grants to support those local efforts, huh?
Let's say that.
Yeah, I guess if you're asking me to comment, I think this isn't saying that the county would take on any of that work. It's just requesting more funding for that type of effort. So local clean sweep hazardous waste disposal programs could be on any municipal level, I guess.
Mr. Chair, I kind of agree with Gary. You know, we've got a lot of things up there, and this is one that we did have when we had solid waste. But you know, we've got to pick and choose, and you put too many and it's waters everything else down. No, I can live with it, but I just suggest we take it out.
So when we have had clean sweep programs, they've been when we have had local clean sweep programs, county or city, they have been very popular with I think they've been well received by people, right? But they're expensive. And so they're not going to happen. They're less likely to happen unless there's some expanded grant funds to do it. But I'm hearing that there is support for taking this out from several committee members. Anyone feel like it's important to keep it in there? Okay, then I'm fine with striking it. That's what I want to do.
Just to comment on that too, I think the town of Red Cedar, the town of Menominee, and the city are all getting together, and next September they're running a clean sweep program.
Okay.
On to the next one.
Sure.
Okay, letter F, update state livestock sighting regulations and procedures, so AdCap 51, to provide local governments with meaningful permitting, siting, and regulatory authority over very large CAFO operations that have significant impact on local environment and land use concerns. I didn't touch this one. Leave it up to you guys.
Well, I think this is probably in there partly at my suggestion. And it's I know it's a little general and not especially particularly specific, but the whole idea of keeping open the opportunity to review our livestock sighting regulations as the industry changes in the future and as local communities develop perspectives on how they want to have input into the siting. Right now, they have very little or no input into the siting. And there are instances in our region of the state, for example, where there are some very large livestock operations being proposed that are that are quite controversial in the local community, broadly speaking. And it feels like there is no, even though those communities have attempted to initiate some kind of shared governance over it, there's really not very much opportunity, and they're being challenged at every step in the courts. And it feels to me like we should leave this in there because from my perspective, I'm not against CAFOs, but there are, what I don't want to see is what I'd be worried about seeing is Wisconsin becoming the landing ground for very large hog operations that are moving from Iowa, and for local communities so the outside operations for local communities have pretty much no input into the siting and regulations. Now, I don't think this is going to happen soon. There's a lot of momentum or inertia to keep things the way they are. But I think personally, it would be good for our county to say that we would like this situation to be open to review, if need be.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Gary.
you have a lot of good points there, but a lot of people are concerned that if you get a small group of really environmentally people, that they could have a veto, and that would not be fair to, it's almost better to have state standards so everybody is treated the same. Because just because you have a small group that might, it just depends on what you mean, what kind of control. Do you have like a say, or would you have a veto, say, nope, it's not going to happen? That's not fair to the people that maybe are local and want to expand to a certain extent.
Right. And I don't think the intention I agree with Gary. I don't think the intention would be to provide a veto on in any sense on typical CAFO expansions that are currently regulated by the state. But we are seeing some qualitatively larger operations that are presenting or thinking of presenting and presenting proposals in the state. And I do think, I'm not sure what it would be. I think that this is a sort of the third wire, a third rail of agricultural politics in Wisconsin. But unless we provide, here's my thought, unless we provide some reasonable way for local communities to have some level of input over these, we're going to see a backlash on this that's going to be quite large, and it could impact eventually the ability for just regular siting authority that we have right now. So I think raising the potential for some kind of revisions to the statute would be in the interest of the state and the local communities and the farmers.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. That was a topic of discussion years ago in the livestock siting group, and I think it remains important at least to have a look at this. So I would advocate for keeping it here.
This is Monica. I also agree with keeping it.
And
Anybody else?
this is Mike. I agree. And I think that if anything ever was passed, the legislature would make sure that it was not, would not allow too much say. So I feel pretty safe in that they're not going to allow us any kind of veto power.
Well, so if I can, I'm hearing that the majority of the committee is okay with leaving this as written in the statement. So then let's move on.
Okay, item G, establishment of a statewide groundwater quality program that provides annual funding and technical support to county groundwater testing and assessment programs. I have a suggestion here that including a statewide geologist position within the Wisconsin Geological and Natural History Survey that would provide groundwater mapping and other resources to the counties and towns. My suggestions stem from current action that's taking place statewide right now and discussions within the legislature that I'm aware of through our state association that are particularly looking at a position within the WGNHS. So our previous statement was fairly general. Since this is an annual legislative agenda, to me, it seemed appropriate to try to include a little more detail on it as it pertains to the current atmosphere. But it's certainly up to your decision as to what level of detail you want to contain. I do support the effort for increasing funding towards counties to continue a water monitoring program. Obviously, we've come into some money with ARPA that have been able to use that, but that is not going to be sustained long term. So.
Any other comments from the committee?
I think we should leave it in. I think it's really important. Health and Human Services has a similar plan to emphasize that this is a public health consideration, and I have absolutely no objection to making it more specific and more timely. So a good edit, Chase.
Okay, are there any objections to the edit that has been proposed? Okay, then we'll leave this in.
All right, letter H, support increased farmer assistance by providing, and I've suggested here increased funding to farmers for conservation, including funding for managed grazing initiatives and producer-led watershed efforts. Last time we went through this, there was a specific dollar amount that was being proposed within the legislative process and some of the lobbying efforts, and that's why we included the 850,000. Currently, this effort is still, a topic of interest in some fashion. There has been some movement on it. We did see an increase to producer-led watershed grants in the state, but those, the number of producer-led watershed groups are continuing to increase. Therefore, the funding continuously is diluted. So increasing funding for that, I think, is important. And to tie a specific dollar amount to it is not necessarily, I guess we don't have a specific dollar amount right now of what we're asking. There has been discussions about $1 million, but I guess my suggestion would be it's always going to be a need for increased funding, it seems like, for this program at some point. And I know that funding is limited, but those are my suggestions for this at this time. So.
Any comments from the committee? Okay, then it seems like leaving this in as edited would be fine. Go ahead, Chase.
Okay, letter I, support for allowing efficient access to data and local input of land spreading of human septage. There is, if I recall, just going through some of my notes here, discussions about, so originally in one of the 13 water quality bills was the delay of the sunset of the Wisconsin Fund, which was to help support septic system replacement. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ann, but I believe that did sunset and that fund is no longer available. So while that's not necessarily specific to this agenda with this line, with the exception of it related to septage, but I guess I don't have any suggestion one way or the other to remove or edit it, but it seems like it's important, again, going back to local input. So.
Any comments from the committee?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I think of years ago when we tasked Bob Colson with finding out information, and it was nearly impossible. Yeah, it's a good thing to leave in.
Anyone else?
Agreed.
And then we're looking not just at farmers, we're looking at all different kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Mhm. Well, let's leave that in there. Okay, Chase.
Okay, the last item here was my suggested addition. It says support a carbon farming pilot program that would provide grants to producers and producer-led groups who participate in a carbon market pilot program that would support the sequestration of carbon, reducing impacts on the changing climate, and support an alternative economic market for agriculture. Now that's wordy, but it's based on a lot of the effort that, and I guess hot topics right now, and where some of the federal stimulus money or federal Inflation Reduction Act money, a lot of it's being tied to climate change and that discussion, and the opportunity to create another source of funding to our local community as it pertains to those topics. And right now, the discussion with some of the farmer-led watershed groups in the future is for ranking and scoring and additional funding could be achieved or obtained if a carbon or some sort of climate change effort is part of their, I guess, goals. So this topic is being discussed right now as some of the legislation is moving forward. And I felt it was a product of the times, current times, that may be something you would consider supporting. I think it's going to be made more and more a part of our work in the future as a local conservation department. It'll be, it's already being asked to be included in our land and water, local land and water plans, and things that we probably should be considering, given the potential sources of funding that could benefit the local community. So certainly not partial one way or the other, but just a suggestion that I had.
Any comments from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing this to our attention. I agree with you that this is something that's pretty current, and I'm not sure that I would have been smart enough to bring it forward here, but I'm glad that you did, and I support its retention.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Chase, what's a carbon market pilot program?
So good question. So there is some action within the legislature right now, similar to a, so there's a existing nitrate pilot program, nitrate conservation, if you will. So this would be modeled after that, where there would be an opportunity for farms to apply to participate in this program that would look at carbon footprints. There's programming out there that looks at how carbon is managed in a farming system and how those carbon offsets may benefit in a broader economic market. So whether that's offsets from industry, other development within the country that can offset their potential carbon emissions in a multiplication factor, going back to some farm that maybe through cover crops, no-till, certain management practices, a quantity of carbon is sequestered into the soil that can offset that. So there's potential for a market there. There's a potential for carbon farming as a commodity in a way. So all with the effort of trying to reduce the impact to the I guess climate change. That funding typically is likely going to be coming from federal funds, but this would be something new that would look at how can we create a different diversity within our agricultural system, that we can be looking at carbon instead of just commodity crops.
So when you say a market, is that similar to the city of Menominee buying phosphorus credits from upstream, or?
Yes, I believe that's the intention of that would be. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because that was my question too, because it seemed like there's a lot of like local sewer plants that, can't meet the state regulations to get down to the last small amount. that they can trade that by going out and if a farmer does some no-till or some cover crops, so it's very similar to what Mike was saying for the phosphates.
Yep.
Like there.
Would that be good for the farmers?
I think that's one portion of it. And I also think that there's another layer of here where looking at industry as marketing their product that is being sourced from a place that is carbon neutral, so to speak. So if a farm can demonstrate that their whatever their carbon output is, maybe their product would be more valuable to I think of a General Mills or something like that, where they're looking at their impact on climate and the impacts of climate change and what their role is and how can they offset that and where do they source their products from. That might be a part of a business plan for a local farm to manage in a way that they could sell their product in a different fashion than a typical or the way we have historically.
So I also support putting this in there. I'm glad you brought it up, Chase. I think there are some larger concerns about how the carbon markets would be set up and operated. There's some questions as to whether or not, although science on one hand sounds good, the reality of actually implementing it in the real world is another matter, and that needs to be looked at very carefully. But all those things need to be done, and if they are done, then this could be a very positive thing. I agree. So, anyone have any objection to leaving this in there?
I don't have an objection. I'm just wondering if we need to have the phrase reducing impacts on the changing climate in there. I mean, the other things tell us what we'd like to do. This is telling us why. And whenever I see changing climate, I think of many of my friends. When they see changing climate, they shut down. They will not even discuss something because it doesn't exist. Or it does, man-made doesn't exist, whatever. It's a red flag. So just a suggestion. I don't know what the rest of you think.
This is Monica. I think that's a decent point, given our legislature right now and kind of the tone of it. I think that maybe, I mean, I agree, right, with like, that's a good incentive. That's the reason why, but like politically, I guess it makes sense, or rhetorically, right? I think it might make sense to take that out for that reason.
I'll admit that I'm kind of puzzled by that. In a way, it feels like the only reason we would do this is if it's going to have an impact on the climate. I mean, there's no economic benefit by itself to speak of to sequestering carbon, but I'm fine with. I don't think it's a big deal one way or the other, but that is the point of this: is to have an impact on climate. I don't think that farmers are going to adopt this program or not adopt it based on whether it's being promoted. I mean, this is being promoted by some of the largest agribusiness companies in the world, and all of the major agricultural organizations support this, and they understand that the political support for doing it is the opportunity for agriculture to demonstrate its ability to participate in some efforts to improve, to support changing the climate or avoid changing the climate. So I'd suggest leaving it in, but if people want it out, I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, a farmer is going to go into this program because it makes economic sense for them, and because the agronomic aspects of it make sense on their farm. And if they And the only reason that a corporation or somebody who buys carbon credits is going to buy them is because they need to have some kind of they need to demonstrate some kind of effort towards changing, towards mitigating climate change.
Mr. Chairman, I'll weigh in for a minute. At first, I was startled that Supervisor Kinnear raised that question. And then I changed my mind when Supervisor Barrier suggested that it was okay. I think I think we should leave it in. It just, it is the purpose for this. And I don't know that we need to avoid, I don't know, upsetting a certain proportion of, I don't know. It seems to me we should just leave it in. That's the point.
And like Chairman Quinn said, it doesn't make a big difference, but this is geared towards the legislature. This isn't geared towards farmers right now. Farmers know what they're doing. Anybody that uses it knows what they're doing. It's different than the rest of the paragraph because it says why. Everything else just says, here's what we want. So that's what I'm looking at too, not just the red flag, but I don't care. What do you think, Gary?
I'm kind of neutral on that, but when they talk about the climate changing, I mean, and they always bring up farmers, but when I see these big like industries and that, and it's not just like one group, it's a total group that has got to cooperate. But I think it's something that can be looked into, and if they want to like limit their carbon footprint by paying somebody to do a different procedure, why not look into it? So I would be like, maybe leaving it in.
Yeah, that sounds fine. We can leave it in.
Yeah.
I don't have super strong feelings on
No.
this, so, yeah.
Good discussion.
Okay, so my reading is that after discussion and good points being raised about this, that the committee feels like we can leave this item J as it's presented to us. Any problem with that? Okay, so anybody have anything they want to, that we've talked about so far, but they have reservations about or want to change? If not, I think we could do a motion approving this as our legislative agenda. Anyone care to do that?
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I will move approval of the land use items as edited.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Chairman Quinn, this is Heather Kuhn,
Yeah,
and I do have something to possibly add to the legislative initiatives.
okay, that's fine. Heather, go ahead.
So this is, I guess I don't know that it falls under land use, but the Wisconsin Counties Association has included in their 2023-2024 legislative agenda support for allowing counties to retain a larger portion of the real estate transfer fee. And this isn't a fee increase, but a change in the split between the county and state. A few counties have passed resolutions in support of this as well. And it's again amending the transfer fee split from the current split, which is 80% going to the state and 20% is retained by the county. And they're wishing to or support changing it to a 50-50 split with the state. So, I mean, I can give you a little history on that if you want any more information.
Yeah, a little bit.
So from October of 69 to August of 81, the transfer fee was calculated at $1 per thousand based on a sale price, and the split was 50-50. But then in September of 81, it changed to $3 per thousand, and then the state got the 80% and the county retained 20%. And then I did just a little bit of calculations here so I could at least give you an idea of how much money we're talking about. And the split had it been 50-50, like for the last 5 years, the county would have retained an additional $912,775.60 to be exact. So,
Well, those are good numbers.
yeah.
Thank you for bringing us up, Heather. Anybody have any questions or comments? I'm guessing that the counties do majority of the actual work too, right?
Yeah, we're recording the documents, we're collecting the fee. Mm-hmm.
Anyone have a problem with including this element in our plan?
I think it'd be a very good idea to leave it in or put it in.
Put it in, yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So I threw something in there. Is that okay? The wording?
Yeah, I can share with you what
Yeah.
the Wisconsin Counties Association has in their legislative agenda too, but. Mhm.
No, and I would happily accept the addition in my motion.
Thank you.
And Chairman Quinn, I also have one more item.
Sure.
I think this was probably a little premature and maybe it doesn't need to be included in the legislative agenda, but I just wanted to make you aware of it as long as we were talking about legislation. That currently there's federal legislation in the works regarding shielding public records for federal judges. And it's part of a multi-bill legislation. And there are, a lot of other states that have passed similar legislation. Wisconsin doesn't have anything in place. But in this legislation evolves to other protected parties such as law enforcement. But where the Register of Deeds comes in, I guess, is that we need to be careful that this legislation doesn't penalize the counties for disclosing information and just make sure that any participants understand that if this type of legislation is passed, that they wouldn't be able to easily access their records. It may be difficult to, refinance or to buy or sell a home if records are shielded. I feel that the Wisconsin Register of Deeds Association, they're very proactive. Our association is very proactive when it comes to any legislation that affects our offices. And we just want to ensure that any legislation that's passed is workable for our offices. And our association has formed a work group, the Confidential Records Identity Shielding Committee. And then that committee also gave a presentation at WCA in September. So I don't know if any of you attended that presentation, but I just kind of wanted to make you aware of that legislation. That's again, it's just at the federal level at this point. Could change after the election today too, I suppose, depending on the sponsors that are involved. But so, yeah, I just wanted to make you aware of that. That's something that we're watching.
Do you have language you'd like to suggest, Heather, or
I don't know if I would, I don't know if that I would,
quite ready for that?
yeah, if I'm ready to include it here, but I just thought
Okay.
maybe it was a good time to bring it forward since we were talking.
Yes, it is. It's a very good time. Thank you. Okay. So we have the list as edited and I think discussed. We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Hang on, Chairman Quinn. Can I ask about adding one more thing potentially? I don't know if this is appropriate. Somebody please let me know if this is not. So we've been looking at the Lake District statute, right? And a lot of people noted that a problem is the lack of absentee voting and proxy voting. Is it appropriate for us to ask them to take a look at potentially including those things in the Lake District statute?
Sure. Do you have a suggested edit?
Yeah, okay, so recommend adding a provision for absentee voting and proxy voting to the Lake District ordinance. Or not ordinance, it's a statute.
That's it.
Yep. Yeah, right.
Oh, actually, it would be a statute change, so it would not be related to an annual meeting of a local district. It would be a necessary statute change, which is applicable for this activity, I would believe. Yeah.
So would it be a revision to chapter 33 to provide for absentee and proxy voting by members?
Yeah, that's what I had in mind.
So when you say proxy voting, you're giving that right to somebody else to vote for you? That's
Yes,
what-
correct.
That's what I mean, but then you'd have to have paperwork that that person actually, give that right to somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's necessary, in addition to absentee voting,
Oh.
but something
Okay.
there, for the people who are in Florida or whatever, during the annual meeting, which, yeah.
So Gary raises the question, and the difference between absentee and proxy voting. Could you talk a little bit about why you see it's important to put proxy in there, Monica?
I don't think that it's super important. I think that, people mentioned it in their comments. And so that's just why I brought it up, but, we can leave proxy out of there and just do absentee. That would be fine.
Uh,
I think that'd make a lot cleaner statement, otherwise you gotta have some rules of,
Mhm.
yeah, it'd be easier to enforce I mean, these are pretty informal districts, so giving them a lot of paperwork is not practical. Okay, as it's written, anybody have any concerns or any questions or statements they want to make about it?
No, but I'm happy to, just happy to include this also in my motion.
I have one addition here. Hang on.
Okay.
And I can work with Corp Counsel a little bit just to make sure that we're including all aspects of voting as part of the Lake District. So again, there's many references within the statute that talk about the annual meeting or a special meeting. So that's where special meeting comes in.
Okay, any concerns about that as it is right now? Or are we generally in support of it? Hearing none. Are there any other elements of our legislative agenda that people would like to propose? So Supervisor Morehouse, are you willing to accept this as part of your motion also?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I don't think I have a second on this.
Yes, you do.
I do.
Supervisor Barrier.
Okay, then we're ready. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the legislative agenda as presented, say aye.
I,
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
I will get this sent out immediately following the meeting to make sure it's prepared for the exec committee. So
Good job, Chase. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chase. That was great. So we agreed to number 9A to continue as needed to basically talk about elements of the proposed Lake Tanner Lake Rehabilitation District. And in particular, we were going to at least initiate discussion at this meeting about how we want to go about recommending the initial board of the district. So I think we were each going to try and think about what that process for how that could happen. And I'm wondering if anyone has any, or if staff has any that they would like to suggest. Don't all talk at once now.
Well, this is Chase. I would just comment that since this whole process started and we started discussing the initial Board of Commissioners for the proposed Lake District, we've received one person that is interested, and I did forward that on, I believe, to you, Tom. Other than that, we haven't received any other inquiries. So I think as part of this conversation, potentially utilizing our social media efforts here at the county to at least put out a request, maybe something you want to consider, and we could help facilitate that sort of thing. Otherwise, we are open to your suggestions, how you would like to recruit nominees. So.
Well, Chase, that's sort of what I was left with too. When I thought about this, is it just feels like we probably need to use social media to put the request out there to identify interested participants and see how many we get. We only have a few appointees we can make, and the applicants have requested, I think, informally at least, that they would like to present some. So I imagine they will be doing that for us. But how does that seem to the rest of the committee, to ask staff to sort of circulate this via social media and request people to provide their names, suggest their names for nomination?
I would like to know a little bit about the people who are interested. Maybe we could suggest that they include a statement about what kind of experience they have regarding water quality or whatever issue it is, and a statement of why they're interested in the position, just so we can know a little bit about them.
Yeah, that's important. Chase, could you, maybe we could ask staff to prepare a short and not complicated, but thoughtful application form that people could be sent if they are interested. So we'd have a standard kind of a format to review.
Certainly. That format would obviously include their name, likely their address to verify that they, I guess, just where proximity is. Look at their reason for their interest, any relative experience that they may want to include. And is there anything else particular that? Okay.
I think that would be, I mean, they could have a space for them to provide any comments they might have that be outside of that. But yeah, anybody else have thoughts about it?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
No thoughts as far as the application, but as far as promoting and getting some information out there, asking for volunteers. Make sure you use the Colfax newspaper and talk to Leanne. She always does a great job, and it'll probably be in the Tribune then too. But a lot of people see that.
Good point. I agree.
No,
Anything else?
question for Chase is, I know that the first time that we're selecting these commissioners, how many is the county responsible for like nominating? Because a township, like the biggest one is Tanner, they'd have some say, but you know, how many are we actually looking at?
Yeah, so with the exception of Tainer, they have the obligation to appoint one.
Okay,
This committee would have, or the county board, I should say, would have 4 individuals. So 3 that are, if you will, at large within the district. They have to be just property owners within the district. And then 1 representative that's appointed by this committee or the Land Conservation Committee. So, you know, not only, I mean, that doesn't have to be a current committee member here. It could be someone else, but that is a requirement that you'll have to decide on as well.
and that'd be just the first time, because then next time they are voted at their annual meeting if it's formed.
So the appointment by the county board that represents the Land Conservation Committee, that
As
person
always.
will stay.
Yeah.
But the other 3 would change upon once the
That's what I
district moves
thought.
on.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Other elements of discussion that people are interested in.
I have one, Mr. Chair, just the timeline. So how long does the application need to, would you like it out there? When do you want to discuss this again? It is our intention to bring forward a draft order at the next PRND meeting on the 22nd for consideration, or at least for discussion. So, you know, obviously that's pretty quick, but January 18th, the reminder is when this decision has to be made if we're going to follow the county board's meeting schedule. So
Would
just,
would it make sense to have our December meeting as the deadline for nominations?
so I believe was that December 8th, 9th?
Yeah.
I think it's the 8th. Okay. The first December meeting. Okay.
Is that okay with people? I have one sort of ancillary item that I want to raise. It's related to the district, but also has other elements for the county. And since this is sort of a general discussion area, I think it might be okay to throw it in there and get people thinking about it. But I did have Scott McGovern reached out to me last week and had a discussion with me about a project that it's a little unclear what the status is, but that he would like to engage his students in this next summer on the lake. And it basically involves, and this would only be just for you to start thinking about it. It would involve establishing a small area that would be managed using filters and screens to provide a swimming area in the lake. And his thought is that, and this is something that I know has been attempted down in Lake Monoma watershed in Madison. So the details of it there is some experience with it. But the question, I think, for us is not whether or not this is a good or bad idea. And it may be something that the Lake District wants to pursue, but it may very well raise the question of where this could be. And Scott's inclination is to suggest that the county allow it to happen at the Northwest Landing area. So the question comes up, which committee would have jurisdiction over that? And I guess the question is also, what are the kind of criteria that they would need to address, including there is no swimming area there right now. So does the county want to take that on? And I just throw this out there because these are not decisions I think that we thought of might be on our plate, but they very well may be. So I'm just kind of giving a heads up on it. And we probably have to have a discussion in the county with, maybe with the administration about how they would want to allocate the committee assignment for dealing with, say, the use of a county park and the lake shore of a county park for this kind of a project, whether that would be our committee or, for example, the facilities committee. Now, if anybody has any thoughts on that, but I want to sort of seed the discussion there because we may come back to it later. Okay, anything else that people want to talk about with regard to our process on the Lake District?
Just that one question that I brought up like earlier, and I think I know the answer, but can the Lake District have any ordinance that supersedes the county or the township? I'm pretty sure the answer is no, but just to get it straight in my mind.
Yeah, generally, no.
Okay.
They certainly have the ability to propose and do some boating regulations, that sort of thing. Typically, those are funneled through the township's authority as well. So it's a tricky spot there as to what they can and can't do as far. But in generally speaking, the ability to create new ordinances that would specifically supersede anything that the county has would not be allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
I would just add that the December meeting would be December 13th would be the first meeting. So we would have this application period run through that. So we will do everything we can to get something prepared and distributed as soon as possible. So consider that timeline starting this week or early next week.
Just question on timelines, Chase. Does that give us enough time to move on the order and send it on to exec and to the county board? What are our deadlines for that?
Yeah, let me pull up a calendar quick here. Okay, so we'll have December 13th meeting. We will have another committee meeting on December 27th. If the committee chooses to have one. And then we will have another meeting likely on the 10th of January. And that county board meeting would be on the 18th. So the exec committee would likely be on the 11th, if my typical assumptions are right. So we would have really you'd have the 13th of December and the 27th if a meeting is held. So you'd have 2 to 3 meetings that you'd be able to wrap this up in.
And of course, you could get a whole flood of volunteers this next week.
So, yeah, I mean, right.
That seems like a reasonable timeline to me. Does anyone else on the committee feel like that's like we need to move more quickly on that? Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I would add that keeping with the regular county board schedule of January 18th is this date that we keep in mind. Statutorily, the way the timeline is structured, technically you would have until February 9th to meet that 6-month window, but that would require a special meeting of the county board. And I know that's not really of anyone's interest. So,
no, right.
yep.
Okay. Okay. I guess that's that's our plan then. Any other questions or comments on or thoughts on the the Lake District. Okay, any announcements? So our future meeting date would be November 22nd. And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.